Stop believing that every scandal is about what they tell you it's about. History hands us clean explanations, a breakup, cover up, tapes, a resignation, but sometimes the scandal is just the smoke. February 1973, a president at the height of his power, a comedian at the height of his fame, and a Cold War government drowning in secrets. But one quiet night in Florida, a car pulls up. No press, no headlines, no paper trail the public ever saw. A short drive later, a military hangar, a refrigerated room, and bodies on ice. Months later, the most powerful man in the world is politically dismantled in a way no president had ever been before. History calls it Watergate. But what if the break-in wasn't the crime? What if it was the consequence? What if everything we've ever been told has been a lie?
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Skwarek, and I am here joined by the curator of the classified curiosities tonight, Mr. Philipps. We are your conspiracy realists, and you know that because you already liked, subscribed, followed, shared this with a friend, and visit us at conspiracyrealist.com. Welcome to another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Cheers, Mr. Philipps, and welcome back.
I was a little preemptive there. What's up, C-Tail boy? How we doing?
I know you're very anxious to get diving into that CNC.
I had to wet the palate.
Yeah, you know what? Wetting the palate is good. It
And I'll
helps
lube it
the
up.
words flow out a little bit better. Our audience does know
Plus,
that
it helps
the
the
longer we go
brain
on with
get
these,
going.
yeah, the more in a groove we tend to get. So sometimes the palate wetting helps.
I'm in agreement, my friend.
You're in agreement. Tonight, we are recording this on President's Day, and it's apropos because we are talking about, I think, inarguably, the most popular president in the history of the United States, maybe second to
That we
George
are.
Washington.
That we are.
We're also kind of delving into one of the strangest presidential stories probably ever whispered through intelligence circles. Stories about Richard Nixon, if you couldn't guess that a little bit by the intro, and his friend Jackie Gleason primarily. Talk a little bit about alien bodies and the possibility that Watergate itself wasn't a scandal, but an enforcement or a punishment, a consequence, whatever you may want to call it.
You
ready
sound
to
so
go?
smooth tonight. Your voice is just
You know,
very...
I'm
I want you to
really-
read me a bedtime story, and I want you to tuck me in.
That's the goal we're going for here. We're really trying to push it as we look to sponsors out there that want to host our show and pay us some money to talk about this fun stuff, so that way we can talk a little more freely without the constraints of certain of our platforms. But I found that the radio voice works really well, and so tonight we tell you with a narrative in that voice, and hopefully keeps you around, and hopefully I stick with it and I don't drop it off halfway through.
It's
No real
it's a
reason.
little sexual in nature. I
It's
don't know how I feel about it.
just the way it's going tonight. Yeah, what a way to kick us off here, Mr. Phillips. Before we talk about the base, the bodies, we need to understand the men here at play. And so I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background as we try to do on these shows before we kind of dive in and dissect this a little bit. Richard Nixon was not a charismatic idealist. He was more of a strategist, a cold operator forged in this anti-communist political era of the 1950s. Serves under Eisenhower during some of the most classified years of the Cold War, living kind of in the era of covert operations, CIA interventions, nuclear brinkmanship, classified briefings, kind of par for the course of that particular era. He was very comfortable living in secrecy. Watergate later provides something else about Nixon. he believed in operating behind closed doors, recording conversations, running quiet intelligence channels. He did not fear secrecy. He started to master it. Looking at the other man, Jackie Gleason was larger than life, kind of a little bit of a contrast to the way Nixon would have operated. He was very famous. He was very wealthy at that particular time, untouchable. Beneath the entertainer persona, though, he had a deep fascination with UFOs and the paranormal, akin of our own kind. I heard that he would be a big fan of Cocktails and Conspiracies and would have liked and subscribed to this channel by now. So remember to do that yourselves. He had a collection of UFO materials, books, reports, clippings, and it was so extensive that it is now archived. It wasn't a joke hobby to him. It was a really serious interest. So the question, I think, naturally is, where do a president and a comedian, a famous comedian at that, become friends? Florida, Palm Beach circles.
And that's right.
The one, is it a sport, I guess? Would you call it a sport that seems to unify everybody that has influence and power? Golf?
I was going to say, I know you're about to just crap on golf.
I'm not crapping on it. I'm asking, like, would you consider that a sport? Is that a sport? I don't know.
Yeah, golf is a sport. It's one
recreational activity. Yeah. I don't know how
golf is not only a sport. It's the most difficult sport I've ever played in my life.
Okay, fair enough. I did do some top golf before. It's not very easy for me, but I thought it would be a lot easier because I played plenty of miniature golf. I thought top golf would be a lot easier than it actually was. I was surprisingly mistaken. Shout out to Andrew out there who had a lot of patience actually teaching me where everyone else just told me to get out of there. Money tends to move in very tight circles. Power tends to move in tighter ones. And I don't know if that's sort of what's sort of the catalyst behind golf, right? You spend probably longer than 8 hours, but call it 8 hours on a course, walking through, having some drinks with people. And
close.
So there you go. Again, not a golfer here, but you spend all this time with somebody kind of alone, within your group, obviously, but alone from the world. Drinks tend to flow heavily, especially in an area where there's no cell phones. There's not a lot of recording devices going on there. So people tend to talk about things you see all the time. The trope is business people executing deals on the golf course. Nixon is said to have admired Gleason, so they shared a lot of time socially. And they had access to each other in a way that most people could probably never imagine. Friendship certainly was not disputed, but what is disputed is really what came next here. How do you feel about that, Mr. Phillips?
I agree with you. No, it's I don't think it's like shocking that, I mean, you're talking about two powerful people, right? I mean, one is powerful because he's the president of the United States. The other is powerful because he's probably at that point in time the most famous comedian, around. And so, it's not uncommon for, those two different kinds of groups to kind of mix. I mean, it still happens all the time today.
As a golfer, though, am I accurate in saying that you're seeing a lot of business deals hitting the course? I mean, we see it with I don't want to mention their names, but like more recent leaders of the world, because we don't know which ones are going to kind of get us flagged here, but we see it all the time. Like, that's always the big point of contest. But I don't know if that's you feel the same way or if it's just still troped.
No, I agree 100%. Look, right, like half, I'd say, especially if like you are not very good at golf and you're not an avid golfer, like half, if not more, of the whole golfing experience is just the hang, right? Yeah. It's kind of like half of going to a Giant game, especially in recent years when they suck.
That's pretty
much
tailgate.
It's kind of 100%. Exactly, for a long time. It's very similar in that regard, right? That's the fun of it, is just hanging out, BSing, throwing down some drinks. Like when we play Ocean Acres Country Club, when we get to the second hole, we call that beer hole. We all yell beer hole, and that's when we crack our beers, right? And we waited until the second hole because when we were younger and we started golfing and we were poor, we would bring a lot of beer with us, which you're not allowed to do. So we didn't want them to see us cracking it on the first hole. That's why hole 2 was beer hole.
You're not allowed to because you were too young for it at the time, or you just weren't allowed to drink?
No, it's just that I didn't want to buy the beers at the course because they were really expensive, so I'd rather bring beer with us.
I didn't realize you had to buy them at the course. All right, so as we like to do here is give you a little more background here. We're diving into kind of the crutch of the conspiracy. The night, there's one night in question here that sort of builds this whole thing up. Again, we've established Nixon and Gleason are really good friends, really close friends. And so early 1973, Nixon just secures one of the largest electoral victories in American history. 49 states The guy is completely untouchable. I'm not sure what the second closest to that ever was, but just thinking in like with today's political climate is, or really throughout our lifespans, I don't know that there's ever been a person that's so uncontested that they would secure victory in 49 states. It's one of the most ludicrous things I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at, and I'm for reasons of not getting flagged and shadow banned again, and back-to-back weeks, if you look at the most recent election, that was a pretty landslide victory, right? Between like the swing states that were won plus the popular vote.
Yeah.
When you compare it to what Nixon did, I mean, Nixon, that's unfathomable.
Right. At this time, Vietnam is winding down. China's been opened up diplomatically. Nixon is here. He's shaping global politics. And yet there's this quiet conversation that happens on a golf course. Jackie Gleason, again, in his obsession with UFOs, probably with a couple drinks, that's not really specified there, asked Nixon about UFOs. You know, what's the deal? Are they real? Now consider Nixon's psychology. This is a man who's allegedly recorded his own Oval Office conversations, believed in strategic leverage, operated with paranoia, but also pride. If there was
severely paranoid.
Right. So if there's any secret that's larger than politics, this would probably be it. Nixon kind of brushes off the question to Jackie, just kind of nods his head, is whatever, like, you know, let's move on, blows him off, doesn't say anything about it, moves on. Again, this is a person that's knows a lot, right? When you're sitting in that president's seat, you probably have a ton of secrets that you really just can't answer, especially to friends and family as part of the gig. But the story says that later that night, around 9 p.m., his car pulls up, black car, windows probably tinted out, and it's Nixon. And he shows up at Gleason's house in Florida, knocks on the door, no spectacle, no Secret Service, no parade of cars, just him. One man by himself, knocks on the door, hop in the car with me, come with me. We're going to go for a drive. Gleason and Nixon being friends, not really unusual for them to hang out. Maybe a little unusual that it's happening at 9 o'clock at night. They just saw each other earlier that day. Whatever. Doesn't really ask any questions. They end up driving to a nearby military facility, which most people tend to think is the Homestead Air Force Base, just based on the proximity to where they were. Get there, obviously pass security check. It's just President of the United States. He can clearly pass through security. He's got the clearances for that, obviously. And they come up to this warehouse type hangar, walk through restricted corridors, and then they go back through these corridors into this like refrigerated back room. And there, according to an account later repeated by Gleason's ex-wife, Gleason sees several small humanoid bodies that are preserved in ice. The description has kind of varied throughout the years, but consistently they've said it was small in stature, non-human facial structure, grayish tone, and preserved in containment, like in these tubes or vestibules. Gleason is stunned, not amused, not oppressed, disturbed, quiet, withdrawn, and for a guy that's built his life in the spotlight, comedy, cheerful guy, outgoing. It's a very different. It's a shift for his personality, and this is important because again, this guy's not a fragile personality, right? Like you've often heard a lot.
He's a larger than life kind of guy.
Right. It's somebody that's been in the public spotlight. So he's probably taken tremendous amounts of criticism, and there's like hearing crazy things is probably not the filter. We've heard of stories of like rock stars and musicians, and by all accounts, I'm not a big comedy guy. This is your alley too. I don't know where Jackie Gleason would rank in the realm of comedians in that realm. I read that he's really popular, so I imagine that he's probably a rock star and probably saw some crazy things throughout his life, right?
I would venture to guess. I mean, we're talking about Ralph Cramden here. I mean, The Honeymooners is one of the greatest sitcoms of all time, right?
Right.
So, at that point in time, he's a huge personality.
Is he still on The Honeymooners at this time in the 70s?
No, The Honeymooners was older. The Honeymooners was older. That had to have been done by that point.
So then he's already got that. Okay, so I wasn't sure the timeline of that. Yeah, so then he's already got that fame too.
Right.
That's what I was kind of getting at.
Well, put it this way. I couldn't even tell you exactly what the dates were, but I can tell you The Honeymooners were in black and white, and now we're talking about the 70s.
Yeah, 73.
So, I don't know. When did color TV? Hey, Google, when did color TV come out? Let's ask the Google machine.
1953. On the website.
63. Okay, yeah. So,
okay,
there we go. I digress.
All right.
It's been out for some time. Okay. It's plausible to believe that the honey movers were over and done with by that point.
Okay. So for something to shake him that deeply then suggests what he saw was probably real, right? The pause here. Why would Nixon do this? Trust, you're showing a friend the ultimate secret at this point, right? Ego, flexing access to something that is bigger than politics, control, revealing the truth to someone that's not kind of in your circles. Does maybe you trust him more that he'd keep that because of that rapport that you built, because of that bond? Or honestly, the one that really resonated with me was, if you were holding on to a secret, I'm asking you directly, this isn't a rhetorical question. If you were holding on to a secret like that, what is the biggest burden that would be on your shoulders about that secret?
Just having it in general. I mean, it's one of the most massive secrets. I mean, we've talked about it a billion times in our lifetime, right? I mean, it is like the most massive secret you could possibly have. Like, think of something bigger, and you know it, and only you know it. Okay, yes, there's a small faction of people within the government
right,
who know it,
but people that
in
you
terms
aren't
of you and
friends
your
with,
life,
you can't speak to. Yeah,
right,
yeah,
you and your life, you can't just come home from work, right, from a day at the Oval Office and kick your feet up and go, honey, you're never gonna believe this, right? So like you don't have the ability to kind of to get that information off of your chest. So yeah, man, that's a huge secret. And also, don't forget, right, like when we're talking about famous people, it's always funny how famous groups of people want to be other famous groups of people, right? Your sports stars want to be actors, your actors want to be comedians want to be rock stars, right? They all kind of look up to one another in like this big giant circle. And so I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility for Nixon, although he's the president of the United States, to almost kind of look up to Jackie Gleason in a sense, right? Like there's certainly, like, I think that's kind of plausible as well.
I think that's totally plausible. And going back to what you were saying about that is, there's a level of catharticism, I guess, in that. Like, it's got to be cathartic to be able to just get that burden off your chests. And I mean, knowing Gleason and knowing how obsessed he was with this anyway, right? Like, who better or how better to make a close friend of yours life than to show him the ultimate secret of something he's already obsessed about, something he's been asking you about, probably in jest, but probably partly serious, but then to like get that burden off your chest. Like the ultimate form of trust right there is to show you this. So
it's kind of like when you buy somebody a gift, right? And like, it's an awesome gift and you know they're going to love it and you can't wait to give it to them, right? It's kind of like that's Nixon's gift. Like, oh my God, like I have all this info. I know how interested he is. Like, he's going to absolutely love this. You know what? I really shouldn't do it, but who the hell's going to find out? Let me just blow his mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, look, this is a wild theory, right? Like, this is a very wild theory. It's very difficult to substantiate. There's really
let's get to that.
There's not a lot of facts that tie it to anything.
Let's not go there yet. That's the realist segment. We'll hold that to the end.
Well, we'll see.
I mean, you're on a basis, right? Like in intelligence, in the whole intelligence community, secrets are compartmentalized. Like nobody really knows everything, right? So showing a civilian anything classified, let alone at this level, is obviously a violation. So you always do have to cast a level of doubt. Like, did this actually happen? Because you're making a major violation at this point. But again, you can ask yourself, do the people on the base even know what's actually there? And at that particular time, there's a little more autonomy in what presidents probably knew and what they can possibly do. You look like you're going to say something.
Yeah, real quick before we go any further into the story. So this would allege that these non-human entities were being housed in Florida, which is interesting, right? Because this occurred in Florida. Mm-hmm. See, I had always thought that he put them on a flight to Nevada, even though Area 51 wasn't publicly known then.
No.
I just always kind of assumed that, okay, he flew him out to Area 51. Okay, so that's interesting. I mean, I have no other
So that's an interesting thread to pull on later.
I have nothing else. Yeah.
Yeah, so this actually happened in Florida.
I don't know nothing about it.
This definitely happened in Florida. I don't want to spin off on a tale too much, but in another episode, if you guys want to hear it out there, there's a really prevailing school of thought that's starting to come up that Area 51 actually has never housed any alien craft, and that Roswell itself was actually military testing. We can talk about that if you guys want that. Leave a comment below. Shoot us an email at conspiracyrealist.com through our web form on there, or leave a comment on Spotify. We love those too. But we'd love to do an episode on that. But for today, let's focus on Nixon. We're going to focus on Florida here. And I want to actually take us back just a couple steps too. The big question I had kind of coming into this is, Nixon knows the secret, obviously, but was there any interest that he had in UFOs before this? As far as I can tell, and I could be completely off base here, but there was no public speech where Nixon was campaigning for disclosure. He did not seem to be particularly vocal about extraterrestrials. His context, though, matters. He served during a time where Roswell happened, and he's there in kind of in the mix of the aftermath, in a power position in the aftermath of that.
Sure. I think he worked for Eisenhower at that point, didn't he?
Right, exactly. He was working under Eisenhower. Yep. He's briefed during Cold War classified defense programs. He's got a close relationship now, career-wise now, to military intelligence leadership, and he's overseeing the expansion of black budget defense spending. So, this guy who's, managing and approving secret bombing campaigns in Cambodia without congressional disclosure, right? So he was certainly comfortable bypassing public oversight. I don't know that he was a rebel, or he wasn't looked at as like a rebel publicly, but certainly behind the curtain, behind the scenes, he's fairly fiercely independent with executive powers, showing from a point even before he reached the highest seat here. So I think if there was a president that believed he could operate above bureaucratic constraints, it certainly seems like it could have been Nixon. And I think that despite the fact he never pronounced an interest in alien craft, I think if he believed those programs existed outside oversight, maybe he saw himself as one of those people entitled enough to go see them and perhaps reveal the truth. It also, to me, and stop me if you think I'm off base here, lends itself more to the credibility of the story. Like, this isn't a guy that was notorious. Like, I think Jimmy Carter was like a huge UFO guy. I could be mistaken on that too, but there was other people, there's other presidents, there's other politicians that certainly spoke about the possibility of us having extraterrestrial encounters, or at least having an interest in it. So when you take their stories, maybe you take a little more grain of salt, because people tend to latch onto that kind of stuff and build stories off it. That wasn't the case here necessarily.
By the way, did you see that Obama English, I can speak it.
Obama.
Did you see that Obama just came out in an interview and
I want you to hold that thought. I want you
quasi confirmed it.
That goes directly into my next point then, right? Moving back forward again. Gleason sees all this. He doesn't hold a press conference. He doesn't go public. He just tells his wife, right? Years later, after their divorce, after their death, she recounts the story. She describes him as deeply shaken, emotionally disturbed, completely haunted, horrified, and he reportedly said he saw those small alien bodies in this freezer-like room. Okay? The fact that this story surfaces privately after his death gives it kind of a strange authenticity, right? It's not monetized. It doesn't turn into a publicity stunt. It's told as a memory of something that visually changed him, right? Or visibly, I guess is the right word. His documented fascination with UFOs, I think, adds credibility to that as to why he would ask the question in the first place. But I thought that was very curious that it would come out after his death, and that it would come out from somebody that had nothing to gain from it and gained nothing from it.
Point.
Now going into your talk about Obama here as well. I think that was I wanted to add that in there too.
There's not a lot of substance there from the interview, but go ahead.
There's not. And he came out, Barack came out and actually clarified that he believes that there exists extraterrestrials in the context of the universe, not necessarily here in the United States. I thought the timing of that was peculiar, that question would come out. And I thought the framing of the question and the clip was very peculiar that you would do that. I think there's schools of thought that if you ask that of a former president of the United States, the natural next follow-up would be, where are they? Have you met them? Are they here? Do we have them?
Yeah, we got nothing.
Right.
That interviewer sucked. There was nothing.
Either that or that interviewer was given a loaded question and was prompted to ask that, because if you look at what the Obamas are doing is they have a Netflix company now, or they have a production company that has a deal with Netflix, and they produce these types of TV shows and movies, right? And so it lends itself really well to that school of thought that in the last movie, I forgot what the name of it was. It wasn't a bad movie, actually, but
I didn't see it, but I know what you're talking about.
It's like a post-apocalyptic type movie. Not even
yes.
post. It's like pre-apocalyptic and goes into like what would happen. That was based off of another conspiracy theory of like, you know, the world kind of like a radio wave just like stopping all the electronics, like almost like a global wide like EMP or something like that. I think the context and the reason I wanted to bring that up after here is important here, because in that positioning of a statement, right? Obama doesn't deny or confirm anything about the United States, but he does make it clear that he has an interest in it, which is not something he's ever really publicly said before. It's also framed in a way to obviously get clicks and get views. It's a contrast to, one, the way Nixon operated, and two, the way that Gleason's ex-wife presented the information, where, yes, it happened in an interview, but it didn't happen as like a statement. It was sort of a throwaway line. I just found that to be peculiar, and I don't know. It's weird that we were looking into this episode and that kind of came out at the same exact time. It's a coincidence, but maybe it was the universe sort of alluding to something else. But
synchronicity, which I don't believe
synchronicities. I want to move a little bit into more dangerous territory here. Watergate break-in happens June 17th, 1972. Resignations August 9th, 1974. The official story is political espionage, cover-up, abuse of power. The conspiracy framing is about leverage. If Nixon violated a deeply compartmentalized program by showing classified non-human biological evidence to a civilian, intelligence factions could now view that as reckless. So now let's add to this, right? Nixon creates the EPA, which pisses off industrial sectors. He opened up China, which now shifts geopolitical powers. He ends the gold standard, massive economic disruption. He secretly bombs Cambodia, which again now pisses people off, and clashed with intelligence agencies repeatedly. It's very public knowledge about that. So he's accumulating enemies across multiple powerful institutions. If Watergate became the mechanism to remove him, it would not have required fabricating a crime, right? Just weaponizing it. That's where I think this is interesting. I'm not of the frame that it was Watergate itself was not completely fabricated. It wasn't made up and like pinned on him necessarily, right? But I do think that there's probably a reason. We talked earlier before, you kind of double down on the fact that he was paranoid, right? You're recording yourself for a reason, or you're recording your Oval Office for a reason. You're not just doing that to do that. You're doing it for a reason, right? The suspicion, the paranoia, whatever it might be. Once these tapes now surface, your removal is inevitable, right? It's not chaos, it's precision. You're sending a message. No one's outranking this program. You look at the timelines, right? The Watergate thing pops up, give or take about 2 months after Nixon apparently shows Jackie Gleason this alien body, right? The break-in happens in 72. So it happens pretty much right away as he gets elected in June. 6 months later, he's back in for his next term. 6 months after that, or maybe 8 months after that, he's showing Jackie Gleason these alien bodies. 2 months after that, Watergate pops up. Within a year, he's now resigned. That timeline sounds interesting. And I don't know what you're thinking right there, but I tend to believe one of two things, right? The alien encounter was a way to, we can't trust this guy anymore. We got to get him out. Final straw for them. They leverage all this stuff. They dump it out on the table. Again, we're talking about the most popular president in human history. but is the reason he knew Jackie Gleason liked aliens this entire time, is the reason he chose to do it now because he knew that they were onto him and were coming after him.
That's an interesting theory. And what I was thinking, I thought Vicky was at your house because I heard the dogs, so I just assumed that Vicky was there.
No, my dog is just going absolutely wild with, he just, I'm sure people are home now, but it just, every time somebody even walks by the house, he's found like a new echo of his voice, and he just hits this threshold that's even louder. I actually leaped out of my seat because the doorbell rang for like a UPS person. And I mean, the doorbell didn't even finish ringing, and he just like, woo! And I almost flipped out of my chair. I'm like, what? Like, I was so unprepared for it. But nevertheless,
this is why dogs should live outside.
There you go.
So I do want to point out, I don't think this matters too much because this doesn't detract from the fact that Nixon was very paranoid. He was convinced that there were leaks somewhere internally, maybe not even necessarily within his cabinet, but somewhere in the government. He was very paranoid with communism. I mean, this is a guy who's a Cold Warrior, right? That's definitely true. The recording of his conversations in the Oval Office, that was actually installed by JFK. He put the recording device in the Oval Office. And so Nixon kind of forgot that it was there, and stupidly wound up incriminating himself, not even realizing it, which is kind of funny. Is it plausible that he knew that they were trying to take him down with Watergate, so he just said, "Oh, screw it"? Yeah, I mean, look, it very well could be. It very well could be. I mean, if we look at the timeline of when Watergate occurred, when the actual break-in occurred, and then take a look at this supposed interaction with Jackie Gleason, and then take a look at when the resignation occurred, or I should really say when the Watergate story broke. Watergate was already well in the works, right? The actual event, the break-in at the DNC headquarters, which, by the way, just to add a little, just another twist on this, almost all of the quote-unquote burglars were all intelligence. They were all former CIA.
Right.
Every single
100% one of them. 100% of them, yes.
Yes.
Which is very
just a little interesting there.
Which adds to now the conspiracy behind that, what that actually was.
Right. And then we could also get into Bob Woodward and his ties to naval intelligence and how such a green rookie reporter got one of the biggest stories ever known to mankind. We'll get into that later. Yeah, look, it could be. It could be. I think and again, I didn't live through that point in time, but from watching and reading a lot of things, on Nixon and Watergate and knowing Jackie Gleason, I think it's far more likely that he just had a really cool thing that he wanted to show somebody that he looked up to. I think that was probably more so the case, but I guess you really can't rule that out.
Well, I would imagine it's interesting you brought up the JFK thing, because I think there's a lot of parallels here, because on another episode, we'll talk about the JFK assassination. There's a couple other threads that I think are worth investigating, one of which is JFK's interest in disclosing the idea of aliens, extraterrestrials, and so forth, but also a deal that he made with Russia at the time, where the U.S. and Russia would enter joint operations to explore the moon and share all of the resources of the findings up there, which drew the ire of NASA and subsequently the CIA. So some parallels, because if this ties to now basically alien disclosure on the Nixon side, maybe there's another thread to pull on there. If you do look at that though too, right? If you subscribe to the idea that JFK was an inside job, you couldn't do that twice. You couldn't then take out Nixon the same way you took out JFK, right?
Way too
Especially
hot.
with that much time in between them. No chance that could ever happen.
No, I mean, you're literally, so you had JFK, then Lyndon B. Johnson, and then Nixon, right? I believe
I think, where was Eisenhower? Right before JFK?
No, he was before that.
Yeah, so I mean, you're very close in succession there, but nonetheless, like, you just can't do that really ever, because if you do that again in that short of a time span, it's going to destabilize our country itself. So how else do you take out somebody that's not playing ball, right? And that's the theory that starts to be subscribed to, where when people are talking about do presidents get briefed on everything and how the shadow government starts to kind of step in and take over? Well, this is sort of the basis for that argument now, right? Because they got so flustered with JFK because he was at war with a lot of these departments trying to expose them. Then you have Nixon, who's paranoid and going through the Watergate scandal and does what he does behind the scenes. But that's why I tend to look at the Jackie Gleason thing. I think there's a big school of thought that that was the final thread to pull to get him out of there. And I think there's value to that. But I think more so, I almost just think it's like, why now? Why would you do this right now? Out of all the opportunities you had to do this, you knew this guy was a big UFO enthusiast. Why now? And I think that he probably had it in his mind that they're on to me. Something big's about to happen. I'm probably getting ousted out of here. I'm going to get exposed for something. If he was doing all this intelligence, right, like on himself, he knew that something was up. There's no way this got dropped on him unannounced. And he's 2 months later, the scandal's breaking. He has no wind of it, right? Just not how it works. I think we figured that out in today's current events, that a lot of these things simmer for quite a bit of time. It's just a matter until somebody wants to be the one to blow the top off it. But I think you do that because you're out of the golf course with a good friend. He brings it up and you're like, you know what? Screw it. I'm out of here anyway. I'll never have the opportunity to show this guy again. Here we go. I'm going to take you out and make my friend's life here. Again, nothing, not basing that off of anything, but I thought it was just an interesting concept to consider.
Here's something else to think about, though, right? Wouldn't Nixon sharing classified information with a civilian, that's actually, the fact that he's a civilian is kind of irrelevant. It's somebody that doesn't have that clearance. Yep. Wouldn't that be grounds enough to oust him from the presidency?
Yes, but remember, this is an era where there's not as many security protocols as there would be today. So you're not going to have the evidence that it actually happened, right?
That is true.
If you had that evidence that it actually happened, how are you going to frame that? You're going to say that Richard Nixon took his friend to go see alien bodies? Right. You can't say that. You're going to go see...
Exactly. You can't necessarily say that.
Right. And then what else would have been in a Florida Air Force base? Like, it's not like that was notorious for creating super specific, like, military aircraft, right? Like, it's not, you're not going to do that. Like, what would there be? And I think that would have exposed the story more. Plus, like, we're talking about Jackie Gleason, which, again, I'm going over your words earlier. Like, he's probably a pretty big deal. I don't know enough about comedy outside of, you know, some basics on it. If he's as big a deal as the way we've read him to be, which I think that is the case. I think that's widely accepted that way. I'm sure old timers that are listening out there could probably back that up. Who are you going to believe? You're going to believe some guy, like, politics then too, like, you didn't know who all of these other people were because they're not like lambast. Like, right now you can log on Twitter and you can see 35 senators and know every single one of them, right? Because we see them all the time. We get it wasn't the case back then, at least I don't think, right? Like, you kind of just knew who.
It was a very different world,
right? Like, maybe you knew who your local person was, but you generally knew like the big times. So you're gonna get some like random person to come on there and say like, oh, Jackie Gleason's lying if he goes out on national television and says like, by the way, I just saw UFO bodies with Richard Nixon, the most popular president of the United States. You got to paint this guy as a villain first, Nixon, to get him out of there. And I think that's the build, right? You paint him as a villain and you boot him. But
I think it's a valid point. That's a sticky situation, right? And even though that would be grounds for ousting from the presidency, how do you go about doing that? Because it's a secret that no one's supposed to know about. Could you lie and just say, "Oh, he shared, classified information"? Yeah, sure, you can. Right. But then then you have to lie about that classified information.
You're going to have an impeachment, right? And how do you do that without bringing out grounds for real evidence? Yeah.
Exactly.
But Merrick,
that's a good point.
If it wasn't the most popular elected official of all time, maybe you can get away with it because people won't ask questions. But if you try to take this guy down, they're going to ask why, and they're going to want to know, and they're going to want a reason, and you better have a good one. Implications here. This is kind of that realist segment we're trying to incorporate. We are the conspiracy realists after all, but you know that because you already like, subscribe, follow, and check us out on conspiracyrealist.com. If the conspiracy is true, big if, crash retrieval programs have existed, were preserved at U.S. bases. Presidents are read into secrets, but remain a level of control. Political scandals can function as a method of as enforcement, and disclosure is now governed by an intelligence hierarchy, not elections. Full stop right there before we go on. Do any of those points sound like they could be applicable in 2026?
Yes, and I don't want to comment on that specifically because I don't want to be shadowed again. So my answer is yes.
Yes, and I want everyone out there, let that be a rhetorical question, actually. Pretend Tim didn't say anything at all. Let it be rhetorical for all of you. Crash retrieval programs existed and were preserved at U.S. bases. Presidents are read into secrets but remain controlled. Political scandals, I have this written down, guys. Political scandals can function as enforcement. Disclosures governed, I can't even speak now, by intelligence hierarchy, not elections. I maybe shouldn't even use that word. Think about that and apply that. Well, we used it at the beginning. It was like the first word that was said. Apply that to logic today, right? And now think back to the 70s, right? No. We don't want the vulgar text. Apply that to today, right? And if you can say yes to those questions today, why couldn't you say yes to those in the 70s or the 60s or the 50s, right? Well, let's ground a little bit more. What we do have is a documented Nixon-Gleason relationship, friendship, best friendship, if you will. Documented Gleason UFO obsession. You showed me earlier that he built a home that was shaped in the form of UFO, which you didn't bring up this entire episode, but he did that. That's crazy. I mean, that is a real hook, line, and sinker obsession with ufology. We have a documented Watergate timeline. We know when it started. We know when it was brought up. We know when the resignation occurred. And we have documented intelligence ties between, I think, almost every single one of the Watergate figures. Like every person that was in it has some sort of a tie there.
Yeah. The biggest one being Bob Woodward, which I do want to get to, but continue.
Okay. What we do not have is official confirmation of the base site visit. Of course, we'll never have that. Direct first-person testimony from Gleason, because it doesn't happen until after the fact. Military corroboration or evidence linking Watergate to UFO secrecy. So the alien body story really rests on almost a single secondhand retelling, right? One person. The Watergate as punishment theory is still interpretive, but timing, the secrecy of the era, the personalities involved, I think it does create a narrative that is almost disturbingly plausible, right? Whether you believe it or not, I think the mystery still lingers. And I think there's sufficient evidence that Nixon was in Florida often during that period, and he was in Florida that February. And it would have aligned with the last time he was in Florida, was that February of 73. So the idea that the wife or the ex-wife of Gleason comes out and picks that date, there's no internet back then. It's not like she went on the internet and looked up when the last time he was in Florida was to corroborate that story, right? It just seems odd to say. No evidence either way, but it just seems odd. You wanted to add something about Woodward.
Yeah, well, if just kind of expanding on the whole Nixon saga, look, if we found some way to prove this theory about Gleason and the UFOs, I mean, that would be fascinating simply for the fact that, I mean, we'd also be proving UFOs and aliens, right? But for me, the big takeaway here is the fact that, look, did Nixon cover up Watergate? For sure. Was that illegal? For sure. But the big thing is, it was a coup to unseat a sitting president of the United States. And you needn't look any further than Bob Woodward, who was the reporter who wrote the story, who broke the Watergate story. Bob Woodward started working for the Washington Post, I believe, in 1971. The story broke, if I'm correct, in 1972, so he was working there for just about a year. Prior to becoming a reporter for the Post, as I mentioned earlier, he was in the Navy. He worked in Navy communications, aka Navy intelligence. His source, Mark Felt, was Deep Throat. He was the deputy director of the FBI at the time. Explain to me how a rookie reporter breaks at the time, the biggest, and still today, one of the biggest stories ever.
It's fascinating.
Ever. How does that go to a rookie reporter? It doesn't. Bob Woodward was full of it. He was an intelligence asset the entire time, and the whole thing was a coup to unseat the sitting president of the United States. Granted, I want the Gleason story to be true. I want that to be part of it because that's fun as hell. But for me, that's the real big takeaway, right? And yes, the story is more nuanced than that. right? We try to keep this to an hour for you guys. You know, we could probably, if we did a deep dive, this would be a 5-hour long conversation. It goes deeper than just Bob Woodward. There are many other actors in it that are tied to intelligence. But for me, that's kind of like the smoking gun of, I don't know all the answers, but something's not right. Right? Something doesn't sit well with me in that regard. It doesn't make any sense. And then if you take a look at who owned the Washington Post, Catherine, oh God, what the hell was her last name? I knew I was going to forget it. Not important. She ran in elite Washington power circles, and her and Nixon did not get along at all. So it was very convenient that Bob Woodward starts working at
Washington Post,
her newspaper.
Catherine Graham.
There you go. Yeah. See, look at that. I remembered it just as you looked it up.
Just as I said.
So,
in
any event,
mind control there.
To back away from the details for a second, for me, the biggest piece is, and I this is really not what this episode is about. But I guess to everybody listening, watching at home, whether you believe in the Gleason angle or not, you should be interested in the fact that this was a coup to unseat a sitting president of the United States.
Yeah. And if that's a deep dive you guys want us to take, please do. And we shamelessly plug in here as a joke, but we're actually serious about it too. If it's a topic you want to hear us dive into,
absolutely.
We enjoy these kind of things too. And as long as we don't get flagged by our masters almighty here and get suppressed, we'll keep tackling down some of these avenues as well. But leave us a comment below, like, subscribe, send us an email over at conspiracyrealist.com on our contact form there. We'll happily, we'll do a deep dive on that episode too, or any other cool ideas you have or you want. I thought that was an interesting one. I love anything that intersects real life and UFOs and anything in between. So it's always fun to kind of deep dive there.
Political scandal, intelligence,
right?
This one has it all.
It's a lot of cool stuff, and I think there's a lot of tie-ins that we'll start to pull together for some other episodes too, as we kind of unravel this sequence of events from like the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s a little bit. So again, seriously, can't do anything more for us than like and subscribe, follow us. We're going to come out with another one of these next week. We'll kind of work on what the topic's going to be, but I think it'll be pretty aligned here. Mr. Phillips, any closing thoughts? Are you going to Irish walk us off here?
Always give me the closing thoughts. I have no closing thoughts.
I'm trying to give you the opportunity here. That's it.
Yeah, I'm good.
No, that's it. All right, well.
I'm good. That's it. Thanks for listening, everybody. Come back next week.
Sip. Yeah. Oh, see, he's even got something. I'll give you one of these. So long, everyone. Appreciate you. And raise your glass to mysteries. It's been another Cocktails and Conspiracies.